Okay, so I'm calling to order the Issaquah Transportation Advisory Board meeting, the January 11th meeting, 2021. And this is our first meeting as this board, so welcome everyone. Let's see, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:05. And we don't need to approve the agenda, is that correct? We just need to approve the minutes, is that correct, Stephen?
Correct.
And by the way, I'm the vice chair. Nina Mulligan was the chair, and she's moved on to a different responsibility. So by default, as the vice chair, I'm running this meeting for now. And also, I just want to let you know that I will be dropping off a little bit early. Had a conflict, and I'll let you know when I leave. And Stephen will just stand in my place as the vice chair when that happens. So I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 19th.
No, we're not. We're not actually approving the minutes tonight. Tonight's just more informal run through of kind of our meeting agendas.
Am I looking at the right agenda? Because it's on the agenda.
Oh, it should say will be approved on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Approved at the next meeting.
You're right. You're right. So it's not really an agenda item. It's just a placeholder. Got it. Okay. With that, I'll move on to number 3. Do we have any public comment this evening? Public comment going once? Hearing none, I will move on to agenda item. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Excuse me, this is Clerk Gager speaking. You do have a caller at 360 number that you might want to verify if it's one of your board members or if it is a member of the public.
I believe it's Erica, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute her or send the request to mute just so she can announce that it's her. Oh, Erica, I think you need to unmute your device.
It could be *3.
Oh, press *3, Erica, and then that'll allow you to unmute on WebEx. Not yet.
My apologies. It's *6.
Oh.
*3 is a raised hand. I'm a little rusty.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the ending digits are 4650.
Okay, so we can move on, Cynthia.
All right, excellent. Last call for public comment. Hearing none, we'll move on. And we're on to agenda item 4A, which I believe City Clerk Tina Eggers is going to walk us through.
Hi, thank you. Clerk Eggers here. I am going to share my screen, so give me just a moment to pull up the right platform.
And while Tina is quickly pulling that up, just really quick, for those of you who don't use WebEx regularly, at the bottom of the screen you'll see your mute button. That'll help keep you muted when you're not talking. You can shut off your video or turn it back on with the next button. And then if you need to leave the meeting, it's just the big red giant X.
Hey, Stephen, this is Cynthia. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt and just say that Nina had always encouraged us to turn our cameras on so we can see each other's faces. So obviously everybody has their own preference and their own situation, but I'm going to encourage everyone to show us your face. And I personally find it a little easier to concentrate when I know that I'm still on the camera. So I'm just going to put it out there that as the vice chair this evening running the meeting, I'm going to encourage folks, if you don't mind, to go ahead and leave your video on. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Go ahead, Tina.
All right, thank you. So I'm at a disadvantage here. Let me move a couple things on my computer. We are having some network issues, so I've had to borrow a platform presentation from a colleague, so bear with me. I do know the content, though. I've been a clerk for about 26, 27 years. 16 of those have been here at Issaquah. Some of you are familiar to me, and this content should be familiar to some or most of you. So I'm here this evening to give you your open government training. It's a requirement by the state, and it has 3 elements to it. It has OPMA, which is our Open Public Meetings Act. It has public records and a records management component. The reason why we conduct this training and why it's so important is, one, it's mandated by state law, and two is the intent is to decrease violations that could be inadvertently occurring, is also to reduce risk in lawsuits. And we certainly want you all to be comfortable in your roles and helping each other stay in the right path. So the concept of the Open Public Meetings Act isn't new. It was created in 1971 by the people of Washington State. So again, this is sometimes referred to as the Sunshine Act or Sunshine Laws. The basic idea is that your meetings are open from start to finish and that the public has the right to attend. They have the right to observe what the board is discussing and what they're deciding. It doesn't mean that they have a right to be actively involved in your discussions. Your agenda and your protocols provide the guidance of when that occurs. So again, this is your meeting and the public has the right to attend. Let's see, for in-person meetings, this means that we also have to ensure that we have the proper meeting space in case the public or the media chooses to attend. Right now, in this virtual platform means that we are providing call-in information, and in some cases, you may have live meetings or recorded meetings that are rebroadcasted. Regardless, all of your meetings require advance notice to the public. There are very few exceptions for when that could be possible to have a private closed session, but I can't think of any rationale for your board that would allow that to be so. But I will touch on that just briefly later tonight. So let's move on to what types of meetings you have. So you have what are called regular meetings or special meetings. I believe tonight's meeting is a special meeting because it's happening at a date, time, or location that's outside of your normal protocol. I also understand that you are working to create a new regular meeting date for yourselves. So once you have, is that true? I'll ask. Okay, so since that's true, I understand that at some point you'll be making a formal motion as a board so that the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. In the council chambers or currently virtually will be your standard meeting date and time location. In any event that you meet outside of that time, date, or location, that's referred to as special meeting. And it's really important to distinguish what a special meeting, what you're allowed to do under special meetings. If it's not explicit on your agenda that you were going to be discussing and taking action on a certain topic, then you could not do that at a meeting unless it was specifically identified on your agenda. There are several types of special meetings that we have. It could be called a work session, a workshop. You could be having a retreat. You could be setting maybe some work plan for the year. So regardless, again, of what you call it, it is a special meeting, and all meetings must have an agenda. They all must have minutes. Agendas must be posted and distributed at a minimum of 24 hours before your meeting. But we certainly want to provide more notice than that. And so preferably we look for at least 5 days in advance. State law, though, does provide some emergency provisions that if needed, you could do 24 hours notice. And I did mention earlier that while the public is not, this isn't their meeting to participate in, public comment is important and it is included as part of your agenda. So in addition to them emailing the commission through your staff liaison or sending letters or talking under public comment, that is the proper platform for them to be engaging with you. And there's other things that you all could be doing too, which is I don't know if there's a directive to do a survey or other things that our communications department can be putting into place that would give you information that would be important to get from the community. I did mention executive or meetings that could be closed. We typically call those executive sessions. And again, I can't think of a reason why TAB would need that, but there are provisions under state law. It's intended for discussion only. No action is supposed to be taken in the closed session. If action is needed, it would need to occur in the open session. And again, there are very, very few specific examples to that. So for, say, the council that I support, that would be things like real estate property purchases or lawsuits and legal updates. That would be the proper format for that. And with the Open Public Meetings Act, it's important to recognize what your quorum is. So if you, say, had only 4 members show up tonight, this wouldn't be an official meeting of your commission, and we would need to work to reschedule this meeting or basically call a recess and see if you could locate another member to join you so that your meeting could continue. So for you all, that's 5 members or more constitute a quorum. It's important that that you observe this at your meetings and outside of this meeting structure. So we would not want you to meet in groups of 5 to discuss business of your commission as a committee. We would want to make sure that any committee work was done in a smaller group so that you wouldn't be violating OPMA. You are allowed to sort of gather and travel together. You're allowed to have potlucks and meet in other places. But again, you can't talk about your board business unless it's a smaller quorum group. And then again, I would also mention that if you are gathering, you might want to look at the perception of what you're doing. And so if other people saw you grouping together and talking, they may not know that you're talking about the weather or an event that isn't related to your board business. So there are times that, say, when I'm working with our council and there's a community event, I'll encourage them not to group together in groups of 3 or more so that they can eliminate that perception. State law dictates what action is, and it's very broad, and it says that discussions, deliberations, reviews, evaluations, and of course final actions are all considered action of your board. Sometimes when I talk with other folks, they'll say, well, you know, I was talking with a couple other members, but, you know, we didn't make any final decisions. And it's important to know that even discussing and deliberating an item of a quorum needs to be occurring at your board meetings. And again, that's so that your other members can hear and so that the public can has the right to hear that and be present as well. And then there's a possibility that you might be communicating through email or through phone or through a variety of other mechanisms like in person. So we want to make sure that you are not inadvertently having a string meeting. So we would not want 2 commissioners to have a conversation about your board business, then go talk to 2 other members, and then one of those people goes off and talks to a 5th member about the item and providing input and feedback, because all of that, even though it was occurring in 3 separate steps, would violate the OPMA rules. Again, it's about filtering your information through your staff liaison or your chair. It's about saving that discussion for the board meeting. You are allowed to share information so long as it is not about your preference, not about how you feel about the topic. It's simply, you know, I read a study and here's the article on it. So as long as you didn't take a position on it, you could share that information with the group. But we would advise you to filter that through your staff liaison so that they can send it on your behalf. The staff liaison has more flexibility in gathering your feedback and compiling it than you do separately. Unfortunately, there are penalties that can occur. I haven't seen them be issued for an agency that I've worked for, but again, this is to deter folks from inadvertent or intentionally violating the law. So if we were to if we were to be found guilty by the courts, there are personal liabilities against members. So for the first violation, it could be $500, and for subsequent violations, it would be $1,000. There's bigger costs, though, associated with that. So the city's liable. There are costs and attorney fees that could be applied. And ultimately, action that the board took or provided would be considered null and void. So we want to stay out of that realm. We just want folks to conduct themselves in an open and transparent way. And I'm going to pause there and ask if there's any questions about OPMA before I talk about Public Records Act. And I can't see the chat from here, so if there are, Stephen, I'll look to you or for the chair to speak up.
And for everyone who didn't see my chat message, if you open up the chat window, so the bottom right of the screen, for most of you, open up the chat window and just type in question or comment. That'll help myself or Cynthia monitor when someone has a question or a comment. And then we'll just let you say what your comment or question is.
Okay. And we can come back to questions at the end, too. So I'll move on unless...
Gina, Dave Wagner, I have a quick question.
Okay.
When we did this with the cemetery board, you sent us a little certificate that said we have been trained. Will you be doing that again?
I won't be doing that unless it's required by the individual. So I think your situation was unique. It was something you wanted to have on file, and we can create those as a one-off. We are tracking, though, through your minutes and your attendance who participated in your trainings because it's mandated, and we want to ensure that everyone is receiving this information, which again is why we do the refreshers, so that we're having the conversations more frequently than state law dictates.
Thanks, and I just want to say that there are other boards that I'm on that require OPMA and the Records Act, so the training that you gave us, the little certificates are still good, correct?
If it was within the 4-year period, then yes. If it has been longer than 4 years, and it's something that you need on file, then I would need to produce a new certificate for you.
If you would, please, because I do need it on file.
Okay, you bet.
And it's been over 4 years. Thank you.
Okay.
And if there's anyone else that also needs it on file, just let me know, and I'll coordinate with City Clerk to get that for you.
Yeah, you could also just produce the minutes that show that you received the training from today's session.
And we have one question from Joseph. Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is this presentation going to be accessible after the meeting?
Yes. Normally we would have included this in your packet. We're having some network issues, but we will certainly distribute this post-meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. All right, so the other element to the Open Government Trainings Act is the public records. And again, that's been around since 1970, I think 1971. And what it says is that the public has a right to have access to records. And records are of any sort. And because you are an appointed board or commission, you need to be aware of what the rules are as it impacts you as you serve. So state law tells us a whole lot about Public Records Act, and our local Issaquah Municipal Code reiterates that we follow the RCW it indicates that the city clerk is the designated officer for the agency. And I'm just going to move over to some other notes, make sure I don't skip anything that's essential for you to hear about this before I move on. All right, so Public Records Act allows the city to provide records to anyone who requests records within a reasonable time. So as your designated officer, I would be most likely looking through our incoming and outgoing email. All of the information that is sent from Stephen to you is captured and vice versa. So that is a great resource for us to utilize when someone is asking for communications to and from you. We do encourage you to, if you're using personal email for this, that you maybe settle on one email account and not sort of bounce around between maybe a work email and a personal email. That just might be easier on your end. Basically, there may be a situation where we'll have a request from the media or the public who's looking for records, and there may be records that I don't have access to. And so I would turn to you all and say, here's the request, here's what we're looking for. You have a legal obligation to search for, not delete at that moment, and to produce those records to me so that we can determine if those would indeed be responsive or if they could be withheld for any reason. Most of our records are very, I guess I should define what a record is. It could be anything from a Post-it to a voicemail message to a text message to an agenda, minutes, video, any of that. So Stephen will do a good job of keeping his repository of his agendas and his minutes, the information that he's compiling for you, all of that. You do have the right to take notes at your meetings and discard those once they have served its purpose for you. However, if there's a public records request that has come in while you still have that record, then you'll have to retain it, work with me in order to get the information to us so that we can decide if it's responsive or not. Let's see. Because text messages are part of that possible record realm, we encourage you not to use it for board business. We encourage you to utilize your designated email account for that. It'll make things easier for when you are, if and when you're in the situation where you would have to work with us. I can look back in my history as a clerk, and there's only been a couple times that we've had to work with our board or commission on providing specific records. For the most part, the records that we have on our side are either sufficient or the requester hasn't sought. We do have another document out there that some of you have signed and some of you haven't, so we want to make sure that everyone's up to speed. We have a code of ethics document, and there's a shortcut URL to get to it. It's issaquah.gov/ethics, and it reiterates things like conflict of interest, political activity, the Public Records Act, and the open meetings. So we do want all of you to see that. Sign it if you haven't already, and we'll definitely send it out to your new members. So if after this meeting it's out of your mind, it's in front of you again. And that's it for me. The clerk's office has a lot of information from chairing meetings, roles of role of board members, how to hold effective meetings, all sorts of resources for you. So please have us back if there's an area of interest or something that you want to learn more of. Do you have any members who weren't present this evening that will need to work to ensure that they get this training?
I believe one member, Tom, is the
Okay.
only member missing, but he received this training at the beginning of his term 2 years ago.
Okay, so he is at the cusp of having his training expire, so we'll just want to keep our eye on that. And maybe he could read the PowerPoint, or I can give him a quick call to make sure that that requirement's satisfied.
Yep, I'll follow up with them after the meeting.
Okay, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all again. And pause and see if there's anything I can further clarify, or if not, talk to your chair, find out when it makes sense to have the clerk back if you need more training or information on anything. I see some heads nodding, so it sounds like you're good.
Yeah, I don't see any questions or comments in the chat window. So I think we're good. Thank you, Tina. But if anybody has any follow-up questions or comes up with a question after the meeting, feel free to reach out to me or John with your questions or comments. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the training portion for tonight's agenda. It's going to include introductions. I know we kind of didn't do that at the beginning. We're going to do introductions. We're going to have small discussions so everybody has a chance to get to know everybody that's now on the board. And then I'm going to start talking about kind of how the board operates and how we'll be working together. We'll also introduce you to the staff so you know who on the staff side is kind of supporting this board. And then we're going to go through rules and procedures. There's a guiding document for this board that says how we operate, membership rules, things we have to follow. It's one of our agenda items that we'll need to approve at our first meeting on the 21st. And then we'll go through a very high level view of what our schedule looks like this year. So I'm going to move to sharing my screen. Cynthia, are you able to see what I got? All right.
Yep.
So we'll go ahead and get started on going through who everyone is. I'll get started on this, and then I'll go to Cynthia. And the way we'll make this work virtually is once you are done going through this, I'll call on the next person, just so at least one person's monitoring who's talking and who's not. So my name is Steven. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Issaquah. Prior to working with Issaquah, I worked with the City of Kirkland, City of Redmond, City of Seattle, and Kitsap County. All of them for various amounts of time at a different role of transportation planning. So I've experienced all the different areas of transportation planning, but also implementation and operation and maintenance. And that's accumulated to about, well, close to 10 years, 10 years working in this field now. I grew up in Kitsap County over in Silverdale by the naval base. My dad was in the Navy, and my connection to Issaquah is actually I knew a few people in Issaquah before I took this job, which they kind of referred me to the job opening. And I'll go to Cynthia next.
I love this question, who you are. That's just, it's hard to figure out where to focus on that one. Okay, so my name is Cynthia Kress, and I have a Master of Urban Planning. I've had a couple of careers, and that was kind of my twilight career. And so I have a theoretical interest in transportation planning, and I also, because I studied land use and transportation planning, but I ended up going into professional natural resource planning, but always kind of kept an interest in transportation planning. But it's pretty theoretical. And then I also have, like probably most people on here, a user, everything from walking, biking, transit, driving. I do it all. So I feel like I have the ground at the ground level, and then some theoretical background as well. So I enjoy this kind of work as well. I grew up in Los Altos, California. So you may know that area. Lived in California till 1992. So I've been in this area since 1992. And my connection to Issaquah, I actually moved to what is now Sammamish in 1993. But it was actually unincorporated Issaquah back then. Then it was Sammamish, and then I moved to downtown Issaquah. So I've been traveling through Issaquah for, gosh, coming up on 30 years, but only been an actual Issaquah resident of the city of Issaquah for the last 5 years. And I live in downtown Issaquah, and I expect to live here the rest of my life. I love it here. I will go with Joseph. Next, you're up. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. My name is Joseph. I'm a student at the Overlake School in Redmond, Washington. But before I attended Overlake, I went to elementary school at Sunset Elementary in Issaquah. I've grown up in Issaquah my entire life, and I have a lot of friends in Issaquah. Pretty much, I've lived in Issaquah. I'm 16 years old right now, so I've lived in Issaquah for 16 years, and I've driven through Issaquah. I have my driver's license, and I've walked around Issaquah, so I know pretty much a lot about Issaquah. Also, I'm a member of the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board. And I guess I'll pick Micah next.
Joseph, I actually was part of the Redmond Youth Advisory Board when I was 16, so good to hear that you're on the Issaquah one. So I'm Micah Zaitz-Chua. I live in Issaquah, the South Cove area with my wife and my dog. I work at Boeing. I'm a manager there in our research and technology division out in Auburn, although right now I work in Issaquah, as I think a lot of people do. And so I grew up actually several different states I lived in, but I've lived in Washington, starting in unincorporated King County, which turned into Sammamish. When I was in kindergarten, we moved here. And then Redmond, and then Bellevue, and now Issaquah. So sort of all over, really close to here. And when it came time to buy our first place, we wanted to move to Issaquah. My connection to Issaquah, I mean, I've been going to Issaquah since I first lived in Washington. Memories certainly of plenty of triple X route here, but also a lot of driving through Issaquah too, because we like to travel via road trips out east to like Montana and Idaho. And so, well, I love that from Seattle through Issaquah to Eastern Washington. You sort of get this like city to suburban to rural. So that's me. And let me get back to the list. So I'll call on David Wagner.
Hi, I'm on the phone, so kind of difficult. I don't know if you see my picture or not. I'm probably the oldest member of the board, 76 years young. I've been in Issaquah basically on and off all my life. I moved here at the age of 16 months from California, born in Pasadena, California, but moved home after World War II with my mom and dad to Issaquah. So I call Issaquah home since 1945, so that's a little while. Served 26 years in the military, retired, came back home to Issaquah, have served on various boards, cemetery board for 12 years, active in Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, and as far as transportation, I was a logistics planner in the military after serving in combat, and I have been active in driving bus off and on for 52 years now, retired. I drove for King County Metro as my last driving assignment, and that was for 15 years. I'm a member of the King County Mobility Coalition, also a member of the King County Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy Oversight Board. Very active in the community as far as veterans things, but I'm an avid bike rider and love our community and how it's transpired to be so open to hiking and biking. And with that, I'll pass it on to, who's the next one here? I can't see names on here very well. Stephen, you'll have to help me.
Janie, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Janie Walzer. I have a Master's of Public Administration from the UW that I got last year. So sorry, my dog has been so quiet and now he wants attention. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, but I moved here 6 years ago for college, and I'm not looking back. I love the Pacific Northwest. My husband and I just recently bought our first house out here in Issaquah, so we've only been here for about 3 months, but yeah, we love it. And transportation-wise, who am I? I am like an advocate for increasing access to public transportation for people with disabilities, people with low incomes. I think public transportation should be accessible for all. So that's what I'm attracting me to this board. That's why I'm here, and I'm excited to be with you guys. Okay, next name that I see is Erica.
Erica, I think you're muted on your phone. You might be having some technical difficulties, so we'll come back to her. Jerry, do you want to go?
Sure. This is me. I'm Jerry Bernstein. My experience in transportation is I've worked for 2 different public agencies. I'm an engineer, actually a civil and structural engineer, and I worked for Snohomish County Public Works for a number of years, and also I now work for WSDOT. I actually work for Washington State Ferries there, and I am an avid bike rider, similar to David, and that's what actually had me noticed the request for board members was the fact that it was through Cascades Bike Advocacy. I got this email and I thought, well, why not? Because I'm a real transportation guru, and it really fascinates me how this area is growing, and I just want to be part of helping to make good decisions as far as transportation. So where did I grow up? Well, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I came out here for a job for Boeing many years ago, and since 1989, I've lived in unincorporated Issaquah, actually on Tiger Mountain. And in 2005, I did move to downtown Issaquah, so which makes it easier for biking because I don't have to ride home up a hill on a bicycle. So I think that's one of the reasons why I took up bicycling. So yeah, that's pretty much my connection to Issaquah. And so, of course, even though I work for Washington State Ferries, because I'm an engineer manager within Washington State Ferries, I am able to work at home every day right now. And actually, Washington State Ferries and WSDOT is planning on encouraging everyone who can work at home to continue after the COVID crisis is over. And so I really enjoy getting up my first thing in the morning, and after I have my breakfast and get dressed, I go for a walk every morning around my neighborhood. So anyway, and I really enjoy living in Issaquah. So
I think
So
we'll try to go back to Erica if she's ready. I think I hear it trying to work. Try it again one more time, Erica.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. I'm so sorry for all the technical difficulties. Hi, everyone. My name's Erica Boyd. Who am I? That is a deep question. It's great getting to know you all. I am currently a legislative assistant for one of the 5th legislative district representatives, Bill Ramos. My connection to Issaquah is actually that position. I am a recent transplant. I moved here back at the height of the beginning of the pandemic in March. But I've worked for the 5th district since last December of 2019. I grew up in Whatcom County, North Whatcom County, Washington, almost Canada, not quite, because I like to say I could see Canada from my house, in Linden, Washington. And yeah, I have a master's in public administration. My research actually focused on telework. This is all before it was so common. It actually looked at intersection of telework and gender, seeing how it made life easier for folks with primary caregiving responsibilities and flexibility there. But yeah, I never knew when I was doing that research that we would be in a world where telework was quite a buzzword. Yeah, I'm stoked to get into yeah, kind of the meat and potatoes of transportation. And I love living in Issaquah. It's been a great, yeah, I've lived here only a short time, but it's beautiful here. I live in the Highlands neighborhood up towards the Village Green in an apartment. I have a roommate. She has a cat, so you might see her at times, or both of them in the background, but they know that I have these meetings. All right, please let me know if I left anything out, and I'm going to mute myself now.
Thanks, Erica. We'll go ahead and go to David Holzberg next.
All right. Everyone can hear me, I'm assuming. So David Holzberg, who am I? I will kind of relate it to transportation. I've traveled to more than 50 countries for a couple of years. It's obviously various transportation modes, from motorcycle to train to boat to walking and so forth. Working in logistics in the start of my career, I currently work for an equipment rental company, and now I lead the operations for the company, about 70 locations. We have to obviously rent and move equipment over the road and trucking and so forth. In addition, have a team of drivers across the North American business. So that's who I am. Where did I grow up? Moved a lot when I was young. I've lived in about 10 states and a few countries. So I grew up mostly in the South and then on the East Coast, and then came out here about 5 years ago. And then last year, purchased our first home in Issaquah, technically unincorporated in Miramont, and just excited to be contributing to the board.
We'll go ahead and go with Christy next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Triple. I'm Vice President for Community Development at Raleigh Properties, which for a small business is kind of encapsulating things from governmental affairs, working with local nonprofits, working with the city around land use and permitting issues, and just generally being engaged in the community. Prior to working for Raleigh Properties, I worked for the community and technical college system. So I like to say I went from developing people to helping develop place. At Raleigh Properties, they own and manage things from storage all the way up to 2 Hilton franchise hotels. So we've been really engaged with the city for many, many years, and the community, and looking to kind of understand what the community wants and needs. From that aspect, I've had a lot of opportunity to watch what's happening from a transportation perspective to being engaged in transportation planning for our company and kind of as it relates to the western southern edge of Gilman. Let's see, I grew up in Bothell, Mill Creek area, so born and raised here in Washington State. And then my connection to Issaquah, obviously I work for Raleigh Properties. I've been here in the community for 15 years, living here the last 6. I wanted to be able to live and work in the same community. And then in terms of connection to the greater community, I have served on the Economic Vitality Commission for the city since 2012, and I'll be stepping off that commission here soon to join you all, which I'm excited to do. I've also been engaged for many years, actually since joining here Issaquah, the Greater Issaquah Chamber board. I've been a board chair as well as a member for a long time. So excited to be here with you all.
Thanks, Christiane. And we'll go to Sujata.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sujata Goyal, and I had the honor of serving on this board last year as well. So we really hope you love the plan that you get to now implement. I love this board. I was really excited to have been chosen to be on it, and I'm really excited about implementing the plans that we developed last year. So who am I? I guess if my job defines me, which I don't think it does, but I do government affairs for King County Parks. And so mostly I work in regional trails and non-motorized transportation. So if you've ever been on the East Lake Sammamish Trail or the Sammamish River Trail or the Burt Gilman Trail or the Issaquah Preston Trail, those are all our trails. I help work through interagency stuff with other governments to make sure that we can implement trails for all ages and abilities. And I am a mom and I have a spouse, and I like to be outside. And I enjoy all of our parks. So I grew up in unincorporated Fairwood. My parents immigrated here in the late 70s, and my dad worked at Boeing, and so we moved to Fairwood, and that's where I grew up. And then I went to the UW, and then I came to Issaquah. So I've moved around a ton, and I've had the pleasure of living in Issaquah for the past 14 years, and we've raised our son here, and we love it here. It's a great city, we love being near. We're on Cougar Mountain, so we love being near all of the parks and the trails and the open space. And I'm excited to see more and better non-motorized connectivity on Newport Way. And yeah, looking forward to the year and looking forward to working with everyone.
And then lastly, we'll go to Tom.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry for jumping in late. Just got back in. So I jumped in just in the nick of time. So who are you, where you grew up, in connection to Issaquah? So I'm Tom McDonald. Been living in Issaquah since 1995-ish or so. Where did I grow up? My first 2 years were in Toronto, Canada, and then we lived in Arizona, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona again, New Delhi, India, California, Mexico City is where we lived for 11 years and graduated from high school in Mexico City. Then moved to Texas to go to college. Moved to New England for about 7 years, and then back to California for a project, and then been up here in Washington for about 28 years. part of that, mostly growing up, moving around, but since I went to school and moved around, most of my background is transportation engineering, freeway, highway, road, traffic engineering background. My connection to Issaquah is we've lived here on Squack Mountain since I think 96 or so. We lived in Seattle for a couple of years when we moved here. And then my kids have all gone to school here. We've grown up, I've watched Issaquah grow and change from what it was back in the early 90s, mid 90s to where we are today. So my interest is as we grow, how to be able to keep it where it's still livable, walkable, ride a bike, and a nice close-knit community as opposed to just being traffic congested and so.
Great, thanks, Tom. So as you can tell, we have a lot of members from a lot of different areas with a lot of different backgrounds. And then that was kind of the purpose for recruitment of the board is we want to make sure that have a broad sense of how people use the transportation system and how we can make improvements because you all use it differently and you all use different areas of the system. And that's going to be very valuable to us as we kind of go through implementation or even revisions of the mobility master plan. We won't go through that tonight. Right now, we're going to go through another activity so you all can kind of get to know each other a little bit more, but also see how it all plays out when we start to talk about transportation. So if you have multiple computer screens, you can go ahead and open up another browser and go to this website. If you don't, I would suggest actually pulling out your smartphone and pulling up this browser and going to this website. I'm going to send those of you on your computer, I'm going to send you a link in the chat that you can just open up and it'll go to it directly. And now I'm going to go to the website with further instructions. There it is. All right. Can everybody see what's on my screen now? All right. Now, one thing as we're kind of getting started, this activity is called Hooks and Gifts. It's an icebreaker activity that I like to use because it helps people kind of understand what everybody brings to the table, particularly when everybody's meeting each other. For Sujata, Tom, and Cynthia, we did this actually when you first started 2 years ago, but it was in person, so it was a little bit different. But we're going to do this at least on menti.com. I see that some people are just getting into it. As everybody goes in, we're going to get started on start countdown. Okay. So is everyone able to see the first question?
I did not get in because, 7-6. No wonder.
Stephen, is the first question the 2 skills you bring?
No, that's going to be the next question.
Is it your name?
Oh.
Well, I guess it's just entering in. Huh. All right, well, everyone keep trying to get in, and then we'll get to the next question.
Okay. So right now, the question on the board is the 2 skills. And I think what popped up initially real quick was an icon.
All right, so we'll just go to that next one. So for the first question, enter in 2 squills, and this could be 1 or 2 word answers 2 skills or experiences that you bring to the board. If I were to fill this out, I'd put in planning, or I would put in project management, just as an example. And then you'll see live as we're kind of going through it, everybody's responses into this, what's called the Wordle. And I just realized I was muted, so the last sentence I said, none of you heard. So one of the cool things with going through this Wordle is all the different things that people bring to the table when it comes to going through the transportation planning process. And I think this is an important thing to kind of realize is the broad experience everybody brings, because we don't see things, we don't all are going to see things the same. And going through the next episode, you'll even see that even more because we're going to highlight what people see as kind of important topics that people want to see. So we're going to the next question. And I'm hoping for you to list topics that are important to you. And you can enter multiple if you want. But what I'm hoping to see is a lot of the things that people are going to, topics that are going to keep you engaged. Because I'm actually going to be using this as we schedule out the year. Because even though there's items for every meeting kind of listed out, we're going to be constantly making adjustments so we can fill time, but also keep everybody engaged throughout the year. One of the biggest things that I like to see is updates on washed-out projects or updates from the county on trailed projects. And I think that's important as our community continues to develop and change. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Kind of things that you see rising to the top? You'll need to unmute yourself if you do. Nothing? This is actually pretty interesting. Now, I knew there was going to be some overlap in experience and at least interest when it came to equity and equal access. Many of you made mentions of this in kind of the board interviews, which to my surprise, but also our liking of how this board makeup is coming together. Okay. So we'll use this actually with the board chairs, and I'll send out the results to all this to everybody after the meeting, just so you have a sense and keep it for reference. Because it is kind of important to see, you know, the direction a lot of people want to take this. Sometimes when you talk to a different group of people, safety will rise to the top. Others, it might be transit use, and it just really depends on how when the board is put together and kind of the issues at the time. So unless there are any questions or comments, we'll move on to the next portion, which is to discuss a little more about how this board operates. And I'm not seeing, if you have a question or comment, please just type in question or comment in the chat window. And right now, Cynthia, myself, and John are monitoring that to see, make sure that nobody gets missed. So that's the end of that activity. I will bring this tool back occasionally throughout the year, especially as we continue to work virtually, just so we could get live feedback from everybody and you can kind of monitor and keep track of it. So you still kind of get that experience of being with everybody without the constant interruptions of everybody trying to talk over each other virtually, which tends to be a problem. So we'll go back to this. And for our board, we'll be, one thing that I want to quickly just say is there are a lot of boards and commissions for the city of Issaquah. Even when looking at comparative to other cities on the east side, you see the list on the left side of your screen there. We primarily will interact with the Development Commission, Economic Vitality, this environmental board, which is brand new. This was actually just formed last month. The Human Services Commission, the Park Board, and the Planning Policy Commission. Typically, sometimes we've had joint meetings with them, or we've gone to them for feedback, or we've invited them to attend one of our meetings, just so we can get their particular feedback on a project, especially when we are in the development of the Mobility Master Plan. The other item I want to show you is that we have our own website. If you haven't seen it already, there's the Transportation Advisory Board. Everything that you'll need is going to be on this website, particularly when looking at board expiration. This is important right now because when we recently filled the board, that was a mid-year recruitment process, which means that several of you have filled positions that were going to be expiring this year. This does mean you have to put in an application this year and go through the process again, but there's kind of a special process since you're already on the board and you're going through kind of continuation of your term, especially for Cynthia, Tom, and Sujata to think about. Even though you haven't gone through the full 4 years, which is a regular positions term, you'll still need to submit the application. But in the application process, there's special consideration for people that are already on the board and that haven't completed their terms. If there are any questions about kind of the expiration dates for your positions, it typically is around April that will start a recruitment process every year and fill the positions probably around May. The applications probably will open somewhere around February, but we'll go through the actual recruitment process in April. And then moving on. The other major item I want to kind of talk to the board about is expectations for our chairs. Right now, Cynthia is our acting chair / vice chair, since we do not have an official chair. At our first meeting on the 21st, that'll be one of the first items we'll get to vote on and kind of practice the voting process on, is to select a new chair and vice chair for the board. But the expectations for the chair is that they help set up the agenda and they help with scheduling throughout the year. We'll have regular meetings with the chair, which don't always take up a lot of time, but we will usually try to meet once with the chair and vice chair before every board meeting to help set up the agenda and set expectations. The chair and vice chair also help, they are the main facilitators for each of our meetings. So even though I'm doing most of the talking today, usually it'll be Cynthia or the chair, acting chair, who is kind of going through each of the agenda items and calling on people who have questions or comments in the chat window. The other portion of the chair responsibility is encouraging participation in meetings and calling on people. This is actually a priority for the mayor this year, as she has turned her attention to the boards and commissions, and she wants to make sure that all members are participating in board meetings and we're getting feedback from all board and commissions members. And that's not just regular members, that's also alternates. my expectations for all of you is to provide some feedback on the agenda items. Even though alternates don't necessarily have voting power, I think it's important to hear from everybody, just because everybody has something to contribute for this type of board. The other responsibilities or expectations for a chair and vice chair is that they're engaging with members regularly, whether it's inside or outside the meetings, but they also represent the board. So, for example, the mayor has a recovery task force related to the pandemic, and the chair and vice chair has been asked to attend those meetings occasionally to provide feedback on the Transportation Advisory Board and what the recovery task force is looking for. One important note for everyone to know, but more particularly the chair and vice chair, is that meetings are governed typically by Robert's Rules of Order. For those who are not familiar with this, there are some cliff notes online that'll help you understand what this is about, but it walks you through how to have a fair and manageable process when it comes to having a formal board and having to vote on items. Even though this board doesn't particularly vote on items very often, it's nice to know what the process is and what expectations are. And so I'll send out a link to this when I follow up with the board with the other links I'm sending out on where to find more information about the Roberts Rules, because it's interesting to know what it is, but unless you are into reading procedural documents, it's not exactly exciting either. So now I'm going to turn to John and have him actually go through this next portion with the introduction of transportation staff.
All right, thanks, Stephen. I'm John Mortensen, and I'm the Transportation Engineering Manager. Been with the city of Issaquah since the spring of 2017, and before that I worked for a consultant on the city of Issaquah's project. So I've had a long time with the Issaquah, it feels like now. And going through our staff that we have, the Public Works Director is Robert York. He wasn't able to make it here tonight. He'll make it to a handful of the meetings, not too many. And then I introduce myself. I'll make it to all of these meetings and plan to participate and help Stephen run them. And then Isabel is our senior transportation engineer. She just started about 2 months ago, and before working for Issaquah, she worked for the city of Sammamish and played a big role in helping expand their adaptive signal system. And before that, she was a traffic engineer for several different consulting firms. And let's see here, Stephen, as you guys know, he's the transportation planner. He's been with the city a couple years now, and besides doing the staffing the Transportation Advisory Board, Stephen also played a big role in allowing the city to have the streetery on Front Street last summer, and also with the mobility master plan. And then before I move on to coordination with other staff, I'll give Isabel the chance to say hi, since Stephen and I have done the talking from the staff point of view.
Hi, I'm Isabel, and as John mentioned, I joined the city about 2 months ago. I'll be working with different projects, including 12th and 17th intersection improvements project on Newport, State Route 900 to 54th. Part of that project will include also a race intersection at King County's Trailhead entrance, and a pedestrian bridge over anti-aircraft creek. So, and I will also be working on Newport's early acquisition project as well.
So thank you, Isabel. For the transportation group, we do everything from the planning, design, and construction of transportation projects and regional coordination with different stakeholders like WashDOT, the county, the city of Sammamish, a number of others. We also coordinate a lot of our work with different city departments. For example, the police department, because their job is to enforce the traffic rules. The Parks Department for the city of Issaquah, besides taking care of a lot of the great parks around the city, they also are responsible for the city's trail system, which is part of the transportation network. And so we work closely with them, especially for, they've got plans to have shared use paths connecting the different parks. We also work a lot with the Community Planning and Development Department. They're the ones who review and permit development and come up with the city's long-range comprehensive plan. And so, for example, Stephen worked a lot with the long-range planning to incorporate the mobility master plan into the comprehensive plan. Isabel is doing a lot of reviews from a transportation point of view when a development has applied for a permit to do some development work. Another aspect that we have from the transportation point of view is operations, and we work very closely with the public works operations people, and they'll do things like the street sweeping, snow plowing, and just generally taking care of our catch basin, our water. And then lastly, we also work with the communication staff in order to get word out, whether it's about a public meeting or traffic impacts. That way we can communicate with the public.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the city's comprehensive plan is the planning document that holds all the city's policies and goals for particular topics. And so there's an element in there on transportation. And so that's been updated as of last month and to correspond with the mobility master plan. All right, John, did you have anything else?
Nope, not on this slide.
Great, thank you. So I can send out a link to everybody where how to access the comprehensive plan and some of the other planning documents. The mobility master plan isn't on the board's website yet, but that's something that we're going to be working towards this year. Before I move on, are there any questions so far? Seeing none, I'll continue to go. So earlier in the meeting, I mentioned that there is a guiding document for the board, at least operation. It's called the Rules and Procedures. On the screen that you see is the table of contents, and I'll start at the top and kind of briefly work my way down. I'm not going to run through exact every detail. This will be on our agenda for the meeting on the 21st, so you'll have this document in your material packet. I just want to run through it quickly just to highlight the major items, just so you know what to look for as you're reading through it. And the main thing is that it sets expectations, defines roles and responsibilities, and defines how the board is supposed to operate and be transparent on how the board operates. This will be something that should become available on the board's website. The city clerk is working on that early this year. So one of the first things that you'll find in this document is that it defines what a quorum is for this board, which is 5 members to attend, as Tina had mentioned during the training. One of the things that we will be looking for is unexcused absences. It's defined in this document and will be closely monitored. Right now, we try to work with everybody. This is a voluntary board. You provide recommendations to staff and city council. We all have lives outside of this board, so it's fine if you are unable to attend. I'll try to get your feedback offline or outside of the meeting just so it gets incorporated, and we'll have the chair or the vice chair kind of give your feedback as part of the meetings if necessary. I try to keep everybody involved as much as possible, but at the same time, don't feel like there is an immense amount of pressure to have to attend every meeting. But it is something that, by the rules and procedures, we are kind of monitoring. This document also defines what alternate members do on the board, and as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, is alternate members are important as part of this board and providing feedback and giving a different perspective on different topics, because not all of us are going to be sharing the same opinions or have different or the same lived experiences when it comes to the transportation system. Alternates will fill in for regular members who aren't able to attend, and the way we select that is it's very complicated. We just select the very first person who shows up when it comes to the alternates. So we try to keep this simple, and we try to make this work for everybody as much as possible, because it's, you know, we all, like I said, we all have lives outside of this. When it comes to temporary committees, the board or the chair has the power to form some type of subcommittee on a topic. This is something that we used a couple times in the development of the mobility master plan. There was a topic that was going to require multiple meetings and discussions, and we just simply couldn't handle that with just one monthly meeting. So we formed a subcommittee that met every week, that talked about a certain topic, and they just reported out at the next month to the full board. And that's the way we were able to kind of get through topics, a lot of topics, through a short amount of time. It made, for those of you who have never participated on a board or commission, one monthly meeting may seem like a lot, but when it comes to these type of topics, it's not a lot of time to cover a lot of this. So as staff, John and I and Isabel, we try to do our best to make this as easy as possible for you all to process information and give us feedback. Because a 2-hour meeting once a month, it's not a whole lot of time to have a lot of discussion. And so we try to make this work as best as possible. When it comes to voting, we'll get to practice this at our meeting on the 21st when we select a chair and vice chair, but we also approve this document because we have to make a couple edits. We're moving our regular meeting to the 3rd Thursday instead of the 4th Monday, which is what's written in here. And we're also going to potentially make a change to how our agendas are set up. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the order of business, one second. This is also listed in this document, and how our agendas are structured. This is one of the edits we might be making a change to in terms of where the reports are going to. We can have a discussion on all this at our first meeting in terms of if there should be a change in the structure, if there should be a change in what's listed for how we're managing or monitoring the board. Public comment is something that comes up frequently in terms of if there should be a change or not. And one thing that's come up in public comment before is that the public comment should be more than 3 minutes. Just so you have something to relate it to, City Council is 5 minutes when someone goes up for public comment. The city clerk has kind of suggested for all boards and commissions to be 3 minutes, because we have found that that's a good amount of time for someone to put in concise terms their opinion on a topic for our agendas. And as I said before, this is a voluntary board. We don't have a ton of time to kind of designate away from board discussions, and we want you all to be able to discuss this and maximize that time for the 2 hours that you meet once a month. And then the other items that come up are kind of what goes in our reports, right? And John will talk about that a little bit more later when we get further through our agenda. So the next thing I want to do is actually go through how to access the material. So I'll send out the link to our board website, but when you go to agendas, and some of you may have already done this, but for those of you who haven't, this is actually really helpful. This is the link that you'll get every month when it'll be Gretchen, one of our supporting staff, sends out an email to everybody saying the materials are available. You should have received one for this meeting today. If you didn't, you may want to look in your spam folder to make sure it's a safe email. But for those of you who did, you can access the meeting materials. Actually, today's probably, let's go back to November. When you go through the agendas, this is how you can access each of the materials. So if I click on this link, this would take me to the draft for that month's minutes, and you can review it. And the same goes for everything else that you'll see at the meeting. So this draft policy that we discussed in November, you'll be able to review it there. Any presentation that's coming, you can look through it just to kind of get a glimpse of what we might be discussing at that meeting. And this is one of the best ways, I think, for you to access all these materials versus me trying to send it out via email and then making edits. If there is an edit, the website, this material will get updated. So you will always get up-to-date information on this website link. John, you had a
yes,
comment?
we do have a question from Erica.
Oh, okay. Erica, go ahead. I think it's *6 to unmute. Maybe I'll just open. Did she type in her question?
She did. And the
Okay.
question is, how do subcommittees work with OPMA rules? There's a provision for it. And that's a question.
Question. Okay. So subcommittees, because it's not calling for a quorum, you are able to operate kind of outside of much of those OPMA rules. But when we form a subcommittee, typically we are asking for kind of summary statements from the subcommittee to go over all the information. And when they report back to the board, we get everybody's feedback from those subcommittees. So the requirements don't necessarily fall on them, but we still like to get information and feedback from those subcommittees. Are there any other questions? No? Okay.
I had one. I was just wondering, how many days before a meeting will the information and agenda be available? So
I prepare all our board agendas and materials a week beforehand. It'll typically be sent out 5 days at the latest before each meeting. And I try to get it out before the weekends because I know weekdays aren't necessarily the easiest time to review these materials. If we have a heavier agenda, I try to get the materials out sooner. But typically it's about 5 to 7 days before each meeting that the email will get sent out.
thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. So the other piece of information I wanted to share with all of you is that with accessing materials, sometimes there's going to be materials that won't be on the website. Particularly when it comes to the subcommittees that could get formed, I'll create SharePoint folders online that everybody will be able to access, and you'll use those whenever there's something that won't be on the board's website. And expectations for this year. So last year, being a very unusual year, we weren't able to go through our full agenda. So some of those items kind of carried over into this year. We did get the mobility master plan developed and finalized. We were able to get the policies and the goals all updated in the transportation element. So that is now all up to date to how we're going to be operating. Now we're going to be moving into kind of those initial phases of implementation, trying to figure out where do we go from here. And that's in this industry, that's kind of exciting because no one's really telling you what to do and how to do it yet. And that's where this board's going to be coming in. We're going to be bringing topics to you and how we're going to be managing the planning aspect of this all and the implementation of all of this. And so when it comes to coming up with creative ideas, this is the portion of kind of the planning process where we're able to get a little more creative of, how do we do something, or if we are doing something, could we do it better? And so the next couple of years are kind of important to kind of move on to meeting a lot of those new goals and policies that were set in the Mobility Master Plan. So in 2021, it starts with the update of our Transportation Improvement Plan. And that's something John and I will be working with all you this month and next month. One ask that we actually have to have is that we have an extra special meeting in February because we have to meet a certain deadline when it comes to getting our recommendations to change the Transportation Improvement Plan by March, because we actually have to submit our draft in March for starting kind of the review process going to City Council. So it's going to be a very quick discussion, but we're also splitting into two different phases. This first phase will be looking at how we want to evaluate this Transportation Improvement Plan, which contains all the city's major capital projects. And then later this year, we're going to go through a process to look at more individual projects to determine if we want to change the scope, if we want to add projects, or if we want to make a recommendation to remove or change a project completely. That's on that list. And that's something that we'll discuss later on. Other big items that we'll be looking at this year includes changing our street standards. And this is important because when it comes to constructing a certain project in the city of Issaquah, every transportation project has to follow our street standards. It needs updating because it actually hasn't been fully updated in about 10 years. And in the transportation industry, it kind of changes every year. And so we're definitely overdue for a big update of our street standards. And that's something that we're going to be kind of going through with all of you. Maybe not specific on should we change this engineering standard for a bike lane, but more of discussion of what our policy should say about the type of bike lanes we should be putting in the city. What should be our standard? What should be kind of the priorities? Those will be the kind of discussions we'll have with the board. And that'll be split up into several phases this year just to help with managing and working through that process with the city council. Other topics will include looking at pedestrian crossing guidelines, and what this is a set of standards and policies specific around pedestrian crossing. So where a crosswalk should go, what type of improvement should be made with that crosswalk, how often a crosswalk should be placed in proximity to another. Those are the type of discussions we'll have. Something that we've worked with the board over the last year and a half. So we'll actually be coming to this board with recommendations that consultant put together based on previous feedback. And then later this year, we'll be talking about traffic calming and transit system. For traffic calming, it'll be updating what our city policy should be around how we handle traffic calming concerns in the city. And for the transit system discussions, it'll be related to the development of a transit plan, something that we won't be able to get to this year. Well, hopefully in the next year or two, kind of work our way towards. Because one of the big aspects of our transportation system is making sure our transit is accommodating where we have development and where we are concentrating growth, something that we hadn't necessarily done in a very good way. And that's something that we'll want to have discussions with the board about of, do we want to restructure a transit system so that we have more frequency where there's supposed to be more development? Or do we want to maintain some type of connections to neighborhoods? And one thing that we'll discuss about later is that you can't always have both, because King County Metro and Sound Transit only have a certain amount of resources. And for smaller suburban cities, we don't necessarily get high priority sometimes. And so we have to work within the resources that are allocated to us, or fight for more, or make recommendations to City Council of how we want to manage it and kind of meet our own goals. And so those will be the type of discussions we'll have later this year, carrying into next year. And then occasionally we'll get project updates from Isabel or John, or maybe one of our project managers that are working on other transportation related projects. Or we'll get requests from city council to give them feedback. And typically that'll be something like the mayor's task force, where they just ask for feedback and we don't actually have to vote. We just bring the topic and we discuss it, and then staff will carry that to the city council meetings in a staff report or some type of recommendation. Are there any questions? I kind of ran through some of that a little quickly, but we'll go in each of our meeting agendas. We'll have the schedule as part of our agenda, just so you know where it's at and you're not having to constantly look for where it's at. And that'll be updated with every meeting as well, as we kind of make adjustments through each month. All right. So the only thing that wasn't on the schedule that's yet to be scheduled is that the city is actually working towards hiring a consultant to provide social equity and inclusion training for all our boards and commissions. So that's something that'll be coming in probably the next couple months, and we'll get that included. And that'll be, and I'll give you all kind of a heads up of when that might be. My hope is that we'll be able to get it done in a regular meeting, but it might call for kind of splitting you all into groups and meeting with the consultant and staff, just so we can get the training done. All right.
Steve, I have a question. This is
yes.
Jim. I was wondering if we were going to have 2 meetings in February, how are we going to set those up? If, we're doing, when will we know when that meeting's going to be?
After tonight, I'm going to follow up with everyone to try to figure out when that second meeting should happen, in the middle of or beginning of February. But our regular meetings from now on are going to be the 3rd Thursday of every month. So just working around that to find that special meeting time.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is reports. So typically what we'll do is we'll start with staff report. John and I will either give you an update on any related topics when it comes to the transportation group, or maybe project updates on something that we've brought to the board before. So one thing could be that the city is working on implementation of the streetscape plan. For those of you that aren't familiar with that, that's the improvements on Front Street in Old Town. And this year we're going to be moving towards adding a festival street on Alder, which is right there in the middle of Old Town off Front Street. And that'll include adding some planter boxes and creating more of a pedestrian-friendly space that we could hold events. Potentially have road closures where we could have more pedestrian-oriented kind of activity, where it's live music. When the pandemic is recovered, or at least we've recovered from the pandemic, we'll have live music, or even seating spaces for people who want to just kind of take food from restaurants and just kind of hang out. One of the installations that'll be going in is overhead lighting over the street, which is kind of a new feature for Issaquah. The other one's adding additional street furniture to kind of match some of the improvements that have already been done. The other part of the reports is a chair's report. So the chair or vice chair would report on any other meetings that they attended, and they would kind of give information about what they heard, or maybe activities that the board could participate in. And the other part of the agenda is a youth report, and this typically is done by one of the youth members, kind of updating. This is one of the items we may or may not take off. This is something that we'll discuss with everybody. It's useful if the youth members are attending other regional group meetings, but it may or may not be helpful for this board. And so we'll discuss that with everyone and see if everybody is comfortable with keeping it or taking it off. And then the last item is other business or announcement. This is where everybody can kind of call out information about special events they've heard of, Sometimes we'll make an announcement on salmon days, or we'll make an announcement on other transportation related or something that's interest of this group. Events in neighboring cities that people might want to attend, or information you might want to look at. So just know that that's kind of the place for kind of the random thoughts or announcements. That's not really called out on the agenda. And then before we call a close for today, are there any last questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time tonight. Oh, Dave, do you have a question? Oh, you're just saying thank you.
I was going to say,
Thank you, everybody.
That's a good summary, Stephen. So.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not expecting you to remember all this the next time we talk. If you have a question or comment, or if you want to know more information about something, just reach out to myself or John. We'll be your regular contacts for this board. Dave, do you have a question, or are you saying bye?
I was going to say bye.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen to make this a little bit easier. All right, Dave. All right, Dave, did you have something you wanted to? Yes, press *6 to unmute yourself on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So will we continue to meet on this particular app from now on? We're not going to do anything. One of the city boards that I do with the city has gone to Zoom, but we're going to stay with this app.
Yes, as far as I know, we're going to stick with WebEx. I know some of you had some complications using it. It is helpful to download the application onto your computer and make sure it's updated regularly. When I first downloaded this thing, it kept crashing my computer until I updated it. So you're not alone in terms of having complications with WebEx. It's kind of been a work in progress.
Thank you.
As far as I know, we'll continue to use this. The state has basically allowed everyone to continue to operate like this until I think next week, but it keeps getting extended pretty much every month. So until we hear otherwise, we're going to continue meeting like this. And even when the state finally says, okay, I'm going to make sure everybody is comfortable before we start meeting in person again. And when we meet in person, it'll be in the city council chambers in downtown Issaquah. Okay, and for those of you who don't know where that is, I'll send out all the information and address on how to access City Hall. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been great to see you all and hear all of you. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.